Welcome to Spirit Coffee Talk this week. I am Elyse, joined with the lovely Ginette and our guest Emily, as well as Lisa, the little black square. She will be joining us. Moving logistics came up, so she'll be jumping in with us in a little bit. But really excited to have Emily here today. She is, she's a wonderful human. I'm excited to dive into a multitude of topics with her today. So we're going to talk a lot more about, and we kind of teased this 2, 3 weeks ago now. I don't even know what time is anymore. Um, Talking about Roe versus Wade, talking about the feminine, talking about like divine rage and the the beauty in the feminine energy and how much I know for me this has been a really like dualistic experience. It's been very challenging and frustrating, and I can also feel the power in the feminine. And Emily, you're here. We're going to talk to you about your book, hopefully either in this recording or maybe another one in a few weeks from now. But for sure, looking forward to talking to you about your opinion on just the feminine and all that comes with it. So welcome to Emily. Oh, Lisa's here. That was quick.
Super fast. All right. Well, welcome, Emily. So nice to have you. And
Thank you.
do you want to give everybody just a little bit of your background, like what brings you here, what you're about, who you are, kind of thing?
Sure. Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I love this space that you all have created. And I've told Elyse that I have some time coming up when my kids will be at camp, and I plan to do some spirit coffee talk binging. So thank you for creating this space. And Elyse has just been, I really can't overstate her importance in my life. She's been my coach for almost 6 months, I think. And I reached out to her. I heard her on a podcast and just felt really called to reach out to her. And I'm so glad that I did. And we've talked about lots of things. I had a loss in my family. So we've talked about grief, and I am a recovered lawyer. I have a recovering lawyer, I guess. And I have my first book coming out, my first novel in a couple weeks. And that clearly has been soul driven. And Elyse has helped me work through that. And my work, my interest has always been, I think, from probably many lifetimes, around feminine power. And it sure feels like we're coming into a time when I hope feminine power, we're going to take it back. I feel like that's happening. And I feel like it's just that really ugly period before that happens. So, and I guess the other thing that might be relevant for me to add is that I never considered myself a spiritual person and not a religious person either, until who died 20 years before I was born really sort of hit me over the head about 2 years ago. And I've been enjoying opening up ever since she gave me that push I needed.
And you cut out a little bit. You were mentioning Frida, your grandmother.
Oh no, yes. And I apologize to everyone because our power went out just literally the minute before we started to record. Yes, my paternal grandmother, Frida, who died 20 years before I was born, helped me. She hit me over the head. And so I came into my spirituality that way, I would say. And it's been a really beautiful journey. And I know I have a lot ahead of me too.
Amazing. I mean, I think that spiritual journey is a continual blooming of petals or revealing of layers. Like, I think as soon as I know for me, anytime I've thought, okay, I got it now, or I've made it, or I've figured it out, it's only been to then stumble into something more. And then you finally get yourself standing and you're like, whoa, okay. And then you stumble again into something more. So, um, I love that you're saying you were hit over the head because I think so many people can be like, yeah, I get that. I get that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I have a question for you. With your experience in exploring the feminine, researching the feminine again for your book and everything that you brought together with it, um, how do you see the evolution of feminine, even in the last like 100 years? How do you see that? Because there was a big rise of feminists, I'll say,
Hmm.
couple
Yep.
decades ago. There was this big push up of it. And then some people would say it has sustained, others would say it has gone down, and others would say it has risen even higher. So I'm curious, where do you see it on that scale?
Wow. I don't know, honestly, that I have the perspective to even know yet. Um, I know, I mean, what's kind of coming up for me right now is that this has something to do with how fractured we've gotten, between women of color, women of different generations. Um, we just seem to be really fractured and disorganized and not very cohesive anymore. I think it seems, talking to my mom and older generations, that there was a time when, and I can't speak for women of color. I don't know how separate things were then also, because they always bear, I think, the heaviest burden when it comes to raising awareness. But it seemed to be like there was this time that there was a lot of cohesion and collective experience of power among women, and a sense of inevitability, almost, is how she describes it. Like everyone was kind of working towards where progress was clearly taking us. So, um, and then I don't know if we all just got complacent. And I certainly am guilty of it. When I started writing this book in 2011, I took several long pauses for life and kids and all that stuff and work. Um, I would never have, it never occurred to me. My book opens with a safe and legal abortion in the States, and it never would have occurred to me that it would drop in a post Roe world. I took that completely for granted. So there's something there. But I think it's a really complex question. And I'm not sure when, I don't know when we'll all have the perspective to really be able to answer it. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. That's
It
beautiful.
feels like what you're speaking to is like, I think, and even Ginette, what you were saying about like some people feel like it's kind of held steady, some people feel like it's dipped, some people feel like it's gone up. It's that I feel like it's almost this perspective of like, and I know I've felt this in periods too of like the feminine energy. And when we speak of feminine and masculine from like an energy perspective, we're talking like the dualistic energies that balance each of us, right? We all have feminine, masculine. Some of us identify more feminine, some of us identify more masculine. Um, I think the feminine energies, the feminine collective is tired. And I feel like for me and what I'm seeing is like we're just starting to get empowered again. And it's almost like everything had to be everything, your basic fundamental human right as a human with a uterus has to be taken away before we're like, okay, I might be tired, but like I gotta stand up now and kind of keep going. And I feel like when you look at, you know, I'm not a history buff by any means, but it feels like there's been this rise and fall and now hopefully a rise again of the feminine's role in society as being just as important as the masculine. And I think that's where sometimes like the word feminist gets twisted because people are like, oh, it's about hating the masculine, it's about this, and but it's not truly. Sure, there's aspects of that have been contorted and taken, and people put their own meanings to it, and that happens with anything, any movement, any ideology, anything. But I think that it's at the end of the day, the word feminist is about equality. It's not about one is better than the other. It's about we all just need to see the value and equality in all aspects of self: masculine, feminine, male, female, non-binary, in the middle, all of the things, right? It's all important. It's all should be welcomed. and it all, that's the one time I will say shoulding is okay. And it all is important for us to be whole as a society. It's like taking a piece of the pie out and being like, oh no, I didn't eat a piece of that pie. That's the whole pie. It's like, no, it's not. You ate a piece. It's gone. There's a piece gone. So I just think that what you spoke to is the whole, is all of that.
Yeah. I feel like something about this, I love that. That was really well articulated too, Elyse. I love that. When like you look back when I studied kind of feminism and the perspective, and they were like, so many of them were turned on because of their perception of man hater. And I mean, like you said, it's not about that, but maybe a little bit. Like it's not the man, it's like the shadow masculine is what we're talking about. That we're saying, hey, you know what? Like this. And then I think some of it was like, well, we went up, women became to have a little bit more power, a little bit more voice. But where I found that the balance kind of knocked us off a little bit was we didn't have full confidence or even knowledge as a feminist perspective or a feminine perspective as we rise within personal and political and whatever power, is how to withhold that true feminine within that. What we were maybe shaped to be or perspective was how to be that, but in a masculine way. So you see all these women leaders or women, administrative or, and people will say, oh, like I had a woman, all the worst bosses are women bosses. They're so this and this and this. It's like, oh, hey, hold on a sec. We're moving into the first phase of women having voices and power, but they're being shaped and taught to be like a man. So you're seeing this in like an inauthentic light and just trying to like be in that world, in a man's world. And for anyone to say that that's not true is like, that would be a man or that masculine part saying that that's not true, because they've never actually felt what it's like to be able to be a strong, authentic woman in a powerful position, but lead with truth, feminine, right?
Because as soon as that feminine is seen, it's seen as a weakness by the masculine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's emotional, blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, so then what that is pushing down this true feminine with that shadow masculine perspective, because that's the programming. So I think where we get this like leap, I think in my perspective, is where we got caught without the complete like lift off, was when we started to go against or not know or articulate or be able to do it in such an authentic way, because we weren't there yet as a global system, because the shadow masculine was still so strong and powerful. Did that make sense?
Yeah. And I think also listening to you speak about kind of the corporate environment and saying there's a little the anger comes at the shadow masculine. And I can't help but think I live in the States, and the masculine hasn't been working out for us very well. I mean, Donald Trump's presidency, if you could call it that, was a complete shit show. And I think there's a real fear. I think some of the really ugly shadow masculine energy we're seeing is fear. Like I think of some of our more hateful male politicians, and it seems like they're almost like cornered animals at this point. I think they see what's coming. They see that their energy has not helped us. It has pushed us back. And they also see that so many people, they're people of color or women or people with uteruses or non-binary people or trans people. That's a whole lot of people who aren't white Anglo males, and it's coming. And I think I think we're lucky to all be able to tap into some of that same energy. All the marginalized groups, I think, are saying like, no, your shadow masculine is not working, and it's hurting the planet, it's hurting people. And so I think they know it's coming, that wave.
I've thought that too. And is from your perspective, do you think that's why these like last ditch, like crazy efforts are being pulled out? Because it's like grasping at the last bit of like, before it kind of crumbles, right? It's
A
like, no,
hundred, a
I
hundred
will stay
percent.
on top. I still am on top. And to show you that I'm going to go so far this way and remove so much of your basic rights because like, don't think you're coming to get me. Like so overcompensation kind of thing. Yeah, I think so too. I thought that. I'm like, but when's the crumbling gonna happen? Like,
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. And I remember, I think it was one of our Supreme Court justices who should never ever have had a spot on the Supreme Court, but got one under Trump, Brett Kavanaugh. I think it was during his hearings that a journalist I really respect, she's highly respected, she's broadcast for um, our public radio for years. I think she just, during his confirmation hearings, I think maybe she just kind of let herself speak very honestly. And she said, this is the conservative wing, putting someone like Brett Kavanaugh forward, who will step on everyone who isn't exactly like him, is like a last ditch effort by these conservatives to try to hang on to some power. And I also thought it was so interesting that my mom, who is almost 74, as soon as Barack Obama was elected and we were all elated and so excited, she said to me, now they're going to come for the women. And I think I'll remember that for the rest of my life. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that
And
gave me
she was right.
chills. Woo.
Yeah. Yep.
Interesting.
You know,
Yep.
it's so interesting. I feel like
Oh,
what we're seeing right now, like there's been so many, and we've talked about this so many times, societal structures like crumbling, and it feels like we look around and we're like, what in the hell is happening with this world? Like, how do we get out of it? How, like, there can feel like there's a lot of hopelessness or fear, or like, what is to come if this is where we're at right now in 2022? And I feel like this is just another example, but maybe I, anyway, am a little more conscious of it, maybe because it's more linked to my experience, and that's been something I've really tried to broaden in this colossal crumbling of structures, is like holding space for all experiences and learning about those things in a bigger way. And for me, I'm really witnessing this as like, okay, I'm seeing the crumbling in real time. I'm not looking back and being like, oh shit, what was that? That everything fell apart. It's like, okay, no, now we've had enough things fall apart that we're seeing the crumbling happening as it's falling around us. And for me, while there's still a lot of fear and worry, right? In Canada, there's a lot of talk about like, don't think that this is that far out of the realm for our experience in Canada either. And I think that that's a true statement. And there's a lot of fear associated with that. And I also see now learning and seeing some of the other crumbling situations and how it has brought people together. And I have seen shifts and I have seen more openness, not the way that we would love for it to be, but there's forward movement. It is giving me hope in this situation because I'm seeing all of the other realms that this has already started to happen, and the crumbling and the deep falling apart of society has happened, and we're starting to rebuild in different ways. And I'm like, okay, this can be true for this too.
mhm.
Which I'm holding on to, from an energy and like hopeful perspective, that we can shift these things, but in order to shift it, you have to tear the house down, because
Breaking through old systems, hey, like that's what this is about. And like talking about, at the beginning of COVID, the 2020, and talking about those 4 years of like incredible upgrades and like change and how quickly it is. It has to have stuff like this for change. It can't just be like, oh, look, like breaking down. We've talked about this too. Breaking down of old systems needs to happen first. But when you're in it and it's happening, it feels really hard. And it's because that's like what women are experiencing right now. right? And so many different demographics are experiencing right now, right? But yeah, like it's these old programming, and what are we gonna see the most change with is diversity, right? Because things were done a certain way for a very long time, and not only that, all the rules, regulations, laws, everything was made in that same paradigm, but that same system. So not only having to like break it down and you have to break it down and then reset it, you know?
That I love that you're bringing that up, because even back to like even okay, where am I going with this? Um, the whole way we're moving forward has to be different, right? Like you're saying, old systems. And I remember Spirit said this to me when, just even in my own personal experience, when I started my business, when I started Avalon Spirit, they said one thing you have to honor is, if a business decision doesn't feel right, you don't do it. No matter what the number value is, the connection it is, whatever it is, if it doesn't feel right, you are running this business based on feel. This is a new way to run a business. And if we think of business design as very masculine in its structure, for the most part, it's a
Yeah.
structured, linear thing. And they're saying move into feel. And feel doesn't disregard logical aspects, but it also brings in feel. And that's what I think the feminine is really, again, the divine feminine energy, not just females, but the feminine is bringing in the new structure, is the balance of it, bringing back that balance of the golden age, balance of science and mysticism, basically logic and feel. The feminine embodies the feel, and the feel, I think, is what is most triggering and causing of the fear in the masculine, because the masculine then has to get vulnerable, and they
Right.
see vulnerability as weakness.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. You nailed it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think yeah, completely nailed it. Um, and Lisa, to a point you made about how things have to crumble first, I can't help but think about how I had to, like, I didn't come across a tarot deck and feel like, ooh, I'm interested in maybe exploring this. My grandmother had to lock my door from the inside when nobody was in the room, make my lights go crazy. Like, I think that's kind of a parallel for, so that I could not ignore the fact that something was happening. And
100%.
I think that's what's happening. It's like, yeah, I think what both of you are saying is so relatable that way. And then Ginette, when you were talking about leading by feel, my eyes almost bugged out, because I just listened to a podcast with Natalie Portman, the actress, who is stepped into an executive role without any executive experience. She is leading the charge, the business of this new women-owned women's professional soccer team in Los Angeles. And she was talking about working with an executive coach. And given that she's Natalie Portman and an Oscar-winning actress and has a lot of resources, I'm guessing it's a pretty sought after coach she's working with. And the coach is helping her. She said that she's just been so conditioned to try to please people. And the coach said, if you run your business that way, where you're trying to please people who are asking things of you, you're going to lead your business astray. And so actually this executive coach, like, who works in this very masculine executive space, is helping her drop into her body and encouraged her, when she has business decisions to make, to see if she gets a full body yes or a full body no, and to make her decisions not based on her head, but what's happening in her body. So that's really different, I bet, than executive coaching looked like 20 years ago.
Totally, right? And
Yeah.
and I think that's so beautiful. Like, that's the parts that give me hope, is when we're seeing that, like, flavoring of feminine energy in various positions. Like, even we could take it into, in some ways, how medicine is blending like intuitive medicine with Western medicine, or like alternate healing modalities with Western medicine, right? Like, I think we're seeing flavorings of that, which can really give us hope, but there's still a lot of an uphill climb to do before we get there, right? Like, we've done the last 2.5 years. If we're considering humanity's doing this U-turn in consciousness, the last 2.5 years have been the downslope, the free fall of tumbling down a mountain, being like, oh my God, everything's crumbling, rocks, all this. We're at the bottom and we're going to start going up again. And yes, that's a little bit better, but an uphill climb, we all know hiking, that's hard, right? Like, that takes grit and determination, but we can get there. And so I think these crumblings are, like we've been saying, paving the way for what we're going to rebuild.
Totally.
So I think that to me, like you were talking about earlier, Elyse, having this feeling of hope, I feel that too, in that like flavoring of things, depending on where I look and what I focus on.
Right.
I feel like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Emily, when you were talking about how you had your own personal experience about like with your grandmother and how nothing, it wouldn't have gotten to that until it like literally hit you over the head. And I think this is a really great way of saying like, okay, so let's say we're at the bottom right here, the grit and determination to go up as a collective system in rebuilding our great big systems that need to be rebuilt. How's that going to start? Sometimes when we look, and I think we've talked about this before, when we look at the whole big picture of wanting to rebuild it, it can feel really overwhelming and it can be like, well, so starting with ourselves and rebuilding our own maybe programming, like really asking ourselves and revisiting some of maybe what we have that we're still carrying with us as old, outdated programming. I was taught this way, my belief systems were this way because I was raised this way, or this was my family systems, or this was my community that I grew up in, or my church, or my, whatever it might be. And it's about really not judging or throwing anything away or resisting anything new. It's really questioning whether or not these systems or these beliefs or these programs actually, number one, still resonate with you, and number two, serve you. And if there's something that is like, you're still a big part of your life, but you don't resonate with anymore, that's not your belief system, I think sometimes it's even harder to say, no, I actually don't believe in that anymore, and I don't see that. But then who am I then? What does that make me? Like, where do I end up then? Like, can I still show up to my family function? Can I be a part of this conversation? Can I still go to this church? And so it's like allowing yourself to come into this balance of this, doing and motion and stuff of the masculine, but the feeling and intuitiveness of the feminine. And by doing that and coming into our actual balance of what we do resonate and how we can rebuild our systems, then, makes the whole collective move in that direction too. So if you think that you're too small to make a big difference, you're actually a very important part of this whole piece by coming into your own balance and understanding what actually, are your beliefs and what do you stand by and resonate with and your authentic life. And only when that happens, I think, and that's another thing, is on a personal level, people are kind of hitting this stage of being like, I don't even know what I believe anymore. I don't even know, right? And so it's happening on a collective level because on an individual level, people are crumbling too. Their systems are crumbling. Mm-hmm. So like having patience and love with yourself, knowing that you might be a hot mess right now. And that's okay, because that's a part of the crumbling, so that we can, as a, collective, raise up together. And especially like women, because that's my jam too. It's like women coming together and the outdated perspective of women versus women, right? That competition. Mm-hmm. And that, like, nah, that doesn't serve individual women, small group of women, or the large collective, and I think that's part of the old belief, is that when women come together and actually combine their energies, they're like, it's amazing. And I know we all know this because we've been a part of some fantastic groups of divine feminine, right? And all of a sudden we're saying, oh, I get why we were taught not to do this, because this is intimidating for somebody who doesn't get it. That's okay. They can be intimidated. They'll work on that. That's theirs. You know what I mean? That was a lot. Sorry.
No, that's fair. It's very fair.
I feel like it's
No,
a
I
good,
think it's great.
yeah, and I feel like it's a good segue into, and even what Jeanette, you were saying, like, okay, we're at the, like, we're ready to climb up the mountain, and like, we're having to climb up the mountain in a multitude of areas, right? It's like mountain feminism, mountain, equality, mountain, lack of discrimination. Let's, climb all the mountains and figure all the things out. And that's just a few.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of a climbing to do. And that, as you're saying, Jeanette, can feel really daunting. And I feel like that is one of the ways in which accessing, because when oftentimes when we talk about the feminine, it's like light and flowy and lovely and emotional, and that's great. Anger is an emotion. And I think sometimes that's bypassed, and the feminine energy doesn't get angry, and they're lovely and soft, and yes, that's all true, and we can get angry. And I think that, like, when you're about to climb up a mountain, are you like, this is fun, or are you like, okay, let's do this, and you're like pushing yourself? And whether you want to call it anger or grit or determination, it's often coming from the same place of like digging in and pushing. And we have to spark that with something, right? And if that is anger for you, and that's not for everybody, and that's totally okay, but when there's this thing of like, don't be mad, just see all the, see all the perspectives, love and light, it's all fine, it's like, no, not necessarily, and it's not all fine. And
No.
if that's your way of processing something, cool, you do you. I'm always going to be a proponent of that. And for those of us that are mad, be mad and transmute that and let that fire like drive you up that mountain.
Yeah. Unprocessed anger turns to rage, right? And I mean, if it has to turn to rage and you got to rage it out, then you got to rage it out. But there is an equal amount of that, dark goddess. Like, I don't know if you guys ever work with goddesses, but like when Callie shows up, you're like, oh, damn, like I'm about to get into it, right? And like allowing yourself to fully experience it, then it doesn't build up, right? The perspective of, what is it? Sugar and spice makes everything nice.
Nice.
Yeah, but like nobody talks about the spice.
Yeah.
It's true.
Like spicy lady, you got to, or else it's,
Yeah.
That's one of the things I love so much and appreciate about this show is that I know that there's a lot of overwhelm here and kind of paralysis amongst so many people who are being marginalized or pushed down or having their fundamental rights taken away or threatened. Conversations like this of everywhere I look is a dumpster fire, and I feel personally under attack, and I don't know what to do because it seems so overwhelming. And I love you always make space in this show, no matter what you're talking about, and you're doing it now, which is that there is a power, and it's not any one person's responsibility to fix what's going on, but there's something very powerful about just being in touch with your own authentic emotions and feelings and needs at this time. And if we can, I think that process, just giving yourself space to feel what you need to feel. And Elyse uses this term that I think resonates so hard with me, which is righteous anger. And I think there's something to that. But if we all can give ourselves that space, I think that's when you find your little corner of the world where you can make some change. And, like the thought, for example, of going to knock on strangers' doors and ask them to vote for someone makes me sweat, like just talking about it, like my hand, like writing about women's experiences, that's my corner where maybe I can make a difference. And so I think we can all find that role that we play if we give ourselves the space to just feel what we're feeling and be ourselves. And I love that you always, no matter the subject, seem to kind of bring it back to that and give people permission to really get in touch with and give space to wherever they are and whatever they need to feel and process and work through.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah,
amazing
thank
here.
you.
That, but it's so true, right?
Yeah.
Like, because the way that I process something, or Elise processes something, or Lisa, Emily, like, they're all going to be different depending on the trigger too. Because what triggers me might not really trigger Elise, and vice versa, and so on, right? So it's like holding space and allowability for what you need, right? And then and feeling that freedom within self to also do the thing, like I don't know, I just think when we realize that, like, and I say it all the time in my stuff, like, you matter. You matter in this world
Yeah.
because we, each and every one of us, does matter in the way that we matter. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's so simple, but it's something that we're so overlooked because we're always, judging against other people. Sometimes it's so ingrained or so deeply rooted, we don't get
That's just it. It's that old programming.
old
The
program.
old programming is to judge others to find self-worth, right? And it's like that's the measuring tool,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I mean, I don't know, like we were taught that by a generation that was taught that in a worse way, I guess. Like you do what you do until like you know better, right? Age old saying. And I think that we're all learning now, holy smokes, I don't quite think this is the way to do it anymore. Some faster than others, which is okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So this may be a really tough question to answer. So it might not even be like an answerable question, but maybe it'll spark some like ideas and thoughts. It's kind of where I'm going with it. But
Okay.
Emily and the rest of you guys as well. Um, I'm curious what you guys think of potential outcomes of Roe versus Wade, where it's at right now. Like, do we see it, or do you see it changing quickly? Do you see it being a long drawn out thing? Like, I guess, what is your feel? What do you feel is going to happen now because?
Oh
And go.
my gosh. Yeah, right. My fear place, like when you say that, I just see women dying. I see women dying of ectopic pregnancies and uterine infections and miscarriages that can't complete themselves. And I see, of course, women dying from doing what they've always done and will always do, which is try to take control of their bodies um, and having abortions when they need to. And if they're not safe and legal, they will die. So that's my fear place. I hate that I think that it's going to take women will die. I don't know how many, but I am hopeful. And I think this is where my gut tells me things are going. I kind of feel like this is Frida, my grandmother, locking the door and making the lights go crazy. This is the like, oh, it's here. Like hell is here. So I have to believe if this doesn't do it, and if this doesn't get people moving and acting quickly, then I don't think anything would. So I think change will happen relatively quickly. I It won't be quick enough. I mean, women are already dying. We're already reading about that. But do I see American women accepting this for very long? Hell no. No. That's just my gut take.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I think there's going to be like some pain in the process for sure. But again, when you say women aren't going to take this, they're not.
I feel like that is the irony of this entire situation is that shadow masculine is like, how are we going to stay in power? Okay, well, we got to keep the women down. Everybody, other demographics, people are rising up. Okay, let's, as your mother said, let's go after the women now, keep them down. Because again, with if I am forced to have a child, then maybe I don't go to school. Maybe I don't get the job. Maybe I can't leave the relationship that I feel unsafe in, or like whatever. There's a million ways in which forcing someone to do something with their body can then impact their ability to show up fully in their life in the way that they desire or are called to. So it's like, okay, let's do that. Let's put them in that situation. And yet, because of patriarchal society, because of the downfalls of the shadow masculine, and again, we're not just talking men, we're talking the shadow masculine, that toxic masculine energy that just isn't serving anybody anymore, other than the shadow masculine. If we try and keep the feminine down, I'm losing my thought here, by the shadow masculine saying, okay, we're going to keep the women down, the irony is they've already been doing that. And women have already had to rise up in their own lives in certain ways, whether that's within a family, whether that's within supporting other women, whether that's within trying to make money on the side so that they can get out of the unhealthy relationship or whatever it is. The feminine has been having to claw and fight and already has a resolve. So by the masculine coming in and saying, yeah, you know what, we're going to try and shut it down even more, it's like they're adding fuel to an already lit fire.
That's exactly it. Yeah. That is the incentive. That is the ignition that women as a collective energy need to be like, boom, try to hold me down.
Yeah. That is fire. And yeah, Elyse, you totally nailed it. And one thing I'm also thinking of when you said, you know, you've been trying to hold women down and it hasn't worked. That was how we got Roe versus Wade in the first place. So this is where I remember like the day in the class, my constitutional law class in law school that talked about the Roe decision. And a Supreme Court justice who's long gone, Justice Harry Blackmun, wrote the majority opinion for Roe versus Wade. And he is from Minnesota. And so in his off time, when he wasn't in DC, he went to the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, which has one of the, maybe the deepest medical historical libraries in the country, the world, I don't know. But what really moved him was the fact that when he did just the nuts and bolts historical research, he realized that from the beginning of recorded time, literally for like 2,000 years, women had been having abortions. It didn't matter if they were legal. It didn't matter if they were safe. It didn't matter how advanced technology is. Because if a dude had something growing at him, inside him, that could kill him, could make him sick, could derail his life, he is going to take care of his own body. And so women, of course, have been doing that. And so that is said to really have put him over to make him solid in his decision. While this is something that happens, it may not be pretty, we may not love it, but it happens. It's always happened. It will continue to happen. And so let's have it be safe and legal so that women can be safe. And of course, we've all carried plenty of shame and trauma and other things that society has created around abortion, but at least we had the ability to obtain a medically safe one. So yeah, women have been rising up and doing what we need to do forever. And I do feel like there's this crescendo, like there, and there's no stopping us. And to put a finer point on it, as Ginette pointed out, not just women, but the feminine energy that encompasses all of this. I just think, and I think that they know, I think the shadow masculine knows that they're far outnumbered and the tolerance for their stuff is just way, way lower than it used to be.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome. I think that's beautiful. That's a beautiful piece of info for people to kind of ponder, because to me that connects directly into free will and the whole design of coming into a human experience from the spiritual perspective. And I always take it to the spiritual perspective. That's my jam. Is free will is a birthright of being embodied as a human, is to make conscious choices. And part of those conscious choices are what we do to the vehicles that are the way we embody this experience since humans were created, right? Like it
So
comes
beautiful.
to that. And so, of course, there would be the knowledge of how to care for the vehicle, right? Like the knowledge is there for a reason, the knowing of how to stop things or end things based on what's right, like what's working right or working wrong within the body, right? Like it just goes back to the root to me. That knowing, that research, his willingness to stand behind it goes back to the very root. Yeah.
It won't take long, I
Yeah.
don't think.
Yeah. I hope. I sure hope.
Me too. Yeah.
And I feel like, Jeanette, what you were just saying, the fundamental idea of being here is free will. What is the best way to try and keep a group of people in a system that you want them in? It's to take away their free will or
Yeah,
to take away their perception
yeah,
of free will.
of free will. Yeah.
And so, I think what you just said is beautiful because it's like we always have free will, regardless of what a system tells us. And so that power is always within us. It is part of our birthright. It is, and the safety aspect is very real. So if you're making safe, free will choices, try to do that in the safest way possible. But remember that we always have free will, regardless of what a system tells us.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Well, I think that's a beautiful place to leave it for
Yeah.
today. Emily, we are going to have you back so we can dive into your book. And that
Thank you.
we're excited to do that. So everybody watching, please do stay tuned. Next time we will have Emily back again. And I do want to make a note that we won't have a Spirit Coffee Talk next week, correct? Nobody else is able to do it? Yeah, so no Spirit Coffee Talk next week, but we will have one the week after. So any closing thoughts or statements or things you guys want to leave everyone with?
Oh, I think that free will piece is the perfect place to leave it. Like you said, I hope everyone just like holds on to that during this hard time.
Mhm.
Beautiful. All right.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right.
you so much for having me.
Thanks for
Thank
coming.
you for being on. It was really lovely to have you on.
Fantastic. I'm looking
Great to
forward to
be here.
next live. Yeah. Okay,
Yay.
everyone. We'll see you guys later. We'll see you next week.
Bye.